Mr. Watkins,
Hey, good afternoon,
you're up.
Honorable Chair Roth and Honorable Evan Lowe, and to the committee. And I'm very grateful for to be able to speak in this hearing. First, I need to thank someone on this committee because last week around this time I was pulling my hair out in frustration. And that has happened a lot in my time on the board. And Assemblyman Evan Lowe was talking to the executive officer of the BRN, and he pointed out that public members can't speak in this forum. And yes, the day before, I was just so down because the issues that I have raised in this board has gone unheard. And when I say unheard, I'm saying that people are nice and they will smile at you, but they will do nothing. And that has been troubling. And I lost faith that in this forum, this board forum, the actual problems and challenges that exist can be solved in this forum. And I will articulate this as I continue. So thank you. So just a little background on me. My name is TJ Watkins, Ezri TJ Watkins. I'm from South Africa. I was appointed to this board in June of 2019. And prior to that, I served on the physical therapy board for 3.5 years. Ended up being the vice chair and also a delegate to the Federal States Board for Physical Therapists. And during that time, I've had extensive training in the role of a board member, how to adjudicate over alcohol cases, alcohol use disorders, gross negligence, and all of these things. And the 80% stays the same when you come to the medical board. And then there's a big layer of legal stuff that you have to learn. And time again, when I came across cases that was troubling from a public protection point of view, and I raised my hand and I brought it before someone, a legal veil was dropped. And it was, you do not understand. You're a public member, you do not understand. Board counsel, she was always nice to help me understand. And that gave me the education I needed to actually go in and really look at these cases. Because the funny thing about these cases is that they really involve people. When they involve people, there is an energy attached to it. So that's my backdrop. Why does this board even exist? I've heard that question so many times. Why do, when people hear you on the medical board, why do they exist? They do nothing. Or they just take licenses. I've heard that as well. So there's different varying perceptions. But I would like to quote the basis on which this board is founded, and that is Business and Professions Code 2000, subsection 2001.1, speaks to the priority of the board, protection of the public. Protection of the public shall be the highest priority for the Medical Board of California in exercising its licensing, regulatory, and disciplinary functions. Whenever the protection of the public is inconsistent with other interests sought to be promoted, the protection of the public shall be paramount. The protection of the public shall be paramount. So now today, as part of my continual education, I hear the executive officer point to Business and Professions Codes 2229, in which he says that public protection is one thing, and then there's rehabilitation and the practice restrictions. Business Code 2001 says, if there's any other competing interest, this shall be paramount. But during this period, I had a whole a lot of notes that I wanted to present, but I don't need to anymore because points have been made And so what I want to explain and clarify, that it became clear for me so I can sleep tonight, is that there's two worlds that we are seeing. We're seeing the world in which you live as a board member and the board staff and all of this. And by the way, the board staff does incredible work. They work really hard. It's we as the board members, when we make these decisions, that fail all of them, including the public. We undermine the staff's work and we undermine the board experts by the decisions that we make. And it's most troubling to sit on a board and have your professional integrity challenged every single time. Every single time. You gotta step over whatever your values are. This board's values, and values being defined as what you do most naturally without thinking. This board's value is we protect the doctors. And we'll go over and above in order to do so. More accurately, Business and Professions Code 2229 gave me insight because rehabilitation in the Medical Board of California is seen as the key to reduce sentences. It's the key to anything. And when you actually apply the guidelines, it is perceived as punishment. But we wrote the law. The only reason why any of these cases that is so troubling comes before this board and are decided by the board, we as the board members, me included, we are responsible for those decisions. We do not push back to the executive officer enough when we come across legal advice that is bordering on it's biased, it's misleading, it is fraught with omissions and commissions, and it reads like a defense for the doctors. It's troubling. A lot of the pain that the public is experiencing is contained in those documents. And it's troubling on every level to sit on this board and to try. I have a positive, forward-looking attitude. I go through life and I am a problem solver. What I do for my day job is I look for patterns, and the patterns jumped out at me in this board. Why do I say that this board protects doctors? Because it sounds inflammatory. But I'm gonna quote statistics because I've been shut down so many times by trying the good way, the right way to do things, that I've decided for the whole of last year, every case, every stipulated settlement that comes across my desk, I'm going to track whether we follow the guidelines, what is the probationary period that we're going to impose on it. What has been troubling in the background, paper, and everything, and I apologize for everything being troubling. It's just interesting. Let's change the word. The board uses a legal veil to protect doctors. And we know now that rehabilitation is on top and then public interest somewhere follows at the lower levels. That we know. We know that from the statistics. And let me bring you some of the statistics. Every case I did, me personally, gave a decision on last year, and what's the outcome of that decision? I have tracked. It's my personal information. I'm not sharing that information with anybody, but it's interesting how closely it resembles the top line numbers within this board. I want to go through them quickly. But before I do that, something popped out at me. A question was asked about the board member composition, and nobody from the board, no one answered it. We were saying there were 7 authorized members of the board. We were saying, yeah, there were 6 members of the board. So let me just clear that, because it's a small thing, but it's a symptom of a bigger problem. and a problem that is consistent. It's a little omission, right? So let me give you the facts about what that looks like. Because while this was happening, I went to go look for those numbers. And in 2013, there was 6 doctor members on this board when they appeared before this committee, and there were 4 public members, a doctor majority board. In 2016, so the following year after the next Sunset Review, there was 8 doctors and 6 members. And now, this year, at Sunset Review, there are 8 members, doctor members, and there were 4 members up to the last board meeting. They just appointed another one. There's an interesting implication with that. Both panels are set up in a way that there's a majority of doctor members. And so if a decision that came from the DAG and our executive officer falls out of the guidelines, or we are unhappy as public members, we simply do not have the votes. We simply do not have the votes to override that. And we have in the past. We have done that successfully. So I don't say it cannot be done. And I will speak to this point a little later again. But first I want to introduce you to the statistics. What did I find? And I'm so confident that when you extrapolate these numbers, that you will get within 5 or 7% of what I'm going to quote here today. And some of it is going to seem far out, and I'm setting the stage for it because it's pretty disturbing. So let's talk about the executive officer using this, in the background paper first, that we settled 79.5% of our cases, but last year we did 84%. And yeah, it's normal. Everybody does it, is what I kept hearing. Everybody does it. Oh, this is a normal standard within this community. Yes, it is. Unfortunately, that may be true, but it's how we do it. And in the how, we find everything. If we were settling those cases, following the guidelines, I would not be sitting here. If we were settling these cases with appropriate real rehabilitative initiatives in place, I would not be sitting here. But I'm sitting here because none of that is followed. It's as haphazard as anything from my experience. My board members may disagree. So let me quote you this. And this is also a theme. The callousness, like indifference with which these numbers are represented is even so much more troubling, because I want to give you a sketch of the background of this. When you enter into a stipulated settlement, the doctor walks away without having to incur any more issues, regardless of how egregious the offense, right? And the victims or the public that has been affected by the behavior of that doctor, they'll be lucky if they get a letter. And they are left having their due process cut short because now we want to save money. Now we want to go efficient over being effective. And that shows you that this system is not designed to protect the public. It is because who benefits, right? But let me bring you into the real feeling stage, the stuff that we kind of avoid. But it came home to roost at our last board meeting when folks called in from this place, Bakersfield. I've only driven past it. And the heart fell, the heartbreak of not having answers. The cry of a mother who lost her daughter. The cry of a father who's feeling powerless because he couldn't protect his family. We created that. No one else. our board panels that makes these decisions, we can easily push back. We can review cases. If we wanted it so, it will be so. Because eventually, all the cases come back to us. And when they come back to us, they come back with comments so we could get better. We could build the system better if we wanted to. But there's no will, there's no creativity that I have witnessed. But what there is concealing, a closed system, shutting everybody down. That's what it is. So let's continue. So out of that 79.5% of the cases that everyone does it, let me give you my statistics. Out of all my cases that I did last year, and this may interest Chairman Roth, that for the stipulated settlements, that we deviated 90% of the time using, in my opinion, weak mitigating factors, misrepresenting facts, and omissions and commissions. I'm going to end it there, just to not be inflammatory. But the theme is that it benefits doctors. And many times when I see this, I'm trying to think what happens in the background. So when I push back onto these cases and come to board leadership, it becomes very apparent that they will listen to me, but humor me, because we're not really going to change anything, because we have a 4-2 majority on your board. And unless I come and I prepare 3 days, 2 weeks in advance, I've learned more skills about presenting cases than I ever thought I would, so I'm very grateful for that. But here's another interesting statistics from my information that I think would be in a range with the board's information if we were to share information, if we ask for reports. Dr. Rod, Chairman Rod asked for how many times did we issue letters of public reprimand? And I have it at 40% of the cases. Around 30% to 40%, that's where we are. So we settle a third or more of our cases via public reprimand. And I learned something today, that it includes 1 patient and 2 simple departures. That's not consistent with what I've seen. And I'll leave that at that too. Another point about the public reprimands, in the background paper, the board quoted, and again, a little thing, not a big thing. The board quoted that, yeah, we have 248 reprimands for 3 years. When I did that calculation for the year 17, 18, 18, 19, and 19, 20, I got 375. That's a theme. It's a theme of how we play with numbers. It's a theme when you present top-line numbers and you don't really get into the numbers. But I don't want to go too deep in that. Someone else can do that, because I've done enough of that. Here's another interesting statistic, right? We settle probation cases, around 73% of all probation cases, with a letter of public reprimand, 2 years probation, 35 months probation, and 3 years probation. Our 3 years probation, we settle that at 19% of the time. So 73% of the time, we deviate 40% from the guidelines on average. So just think about that. Think what that means. That means in the rest of the time, in the other 27% of the time, that's when we follow the guidelines. And I can tell you, most of the times when we do follow the guidelines, those cases needed to be revoked. Those cases are so egregious that we needed to take a stand. But because we don't have the will to really protect the public, we can say that all day long. We can say that. It's not present in the statistics. It's not present in our behavior. And guess what? The public tells us that all the time by telling us they do not trust us as the Medical Board of California. And I kind of agree with them. We have not earned their trust. Recently, when our colleagues were before the Senate for a confirmation hearing, one of our colleagues pointed out that, their doctors pay these fees, and, what I was essentially saying is that it's their board. But I want to explain something about licensing agreements, because I've done a few of those in my life. A licensing agreement is that you have acquired trust in a brand, and whoever buys that brand is buying that reputation. And for many years, throughout the ages, doctors have been the premier brand in terms of public trust. Well-deserved. Well-deserved because they've always done good. But there is a very, very small percentage of doctors that deviate from that old standard. So when we do not follow the guidelines, we dilute the very integrity of the profession that we say we care about, because we do not hold doctors accountable for wrongdoing at the level that we can. Now, there's many reasons for that. I could sit down with our legal counsel and we can go through sections of this law and come up with new ways to do this that will aid us. There is solutions, but we've never had this conversation. And that's why I'm appreciative. I've always ever just wanted this conversation.
Mr. Watkins, I need to give you a 1-minute warning. I apologize, but we're going to have to move on to public comment here very, very shortly, because I suspect that there's a fair amount of that as well.
So I will wrap up in 40 seconds.
Okay.
The other thing that is that we do not, we say we apply the uniform standards, section 1441, and we don't. We say we undermine our experts so much that every time the 40% time that we write public reprimands, 38% of that is because there was expert issues. I'm going to just leave it at that. And in conclusion, I'm a forward-looking attitude kind of problem-solving person. That's how I come to it. But I want to invite the committee on a journey to really address the medical board's challenges, because they are integral to our society. And I want to ask of this committee that they work with us, find the right data and information, so that we can actually have real data to work from, so that we can come up with real solutions. I thank the committee. I thank everyone that made this possible. And I am confident now we would at least begin to start a dialogue in a fresh space. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Watkins. Let me just check to see on the